It should have been a quiet evening. Another routine night in the house where we had built a life, raised kids, celebrated anniversaries. But something had been nagging at me for months. A kind of low, dull hum in the back of my mind. A warning signal I refused to acknowledge until it was too loud to ignore. I'm 45 now, and after 20 years of marriage, you think you know your spouse. The late-night conversations, the shared memories, they cement a kind of certainty, a belief that your life is solid, stable. But lately, the cracks had started to show. Tiny, almost imperceptible at first, but once you notice them, they grow. You can't unsee them. She, my wife, Emma, had changed. Nothing dramatic at first, just little things. She started coming home later than usual, claiming extra shifts or long work meetings. I brushed it off, tried not to think about it. Then it became more frequent. Vague explanations, coldness in her touch, the way her phone was always glued to her hand, face down, locked. One night, while she was in the shower, I picked it up. My hands trembled with a mix of guilt and dread. I wasn't the type to snoop, but something was gnawing at me. My thumb hovered over the screen, then I unlocked it. What I found was far worse than anything I had imagined. Texts, buried under mundane ones. Hidden in an encrypted app. Messages that spoke of things I couldn't process at first. Filthy, graphic words. She wasn't just seeing someone. She was owned by him. He called her his slave, and the worst part? She reveled in it, begged for more. The woman I thought I knew, my wife, had become someone I couldn't recognize. I scrolled through the history, my breath hitching, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. He controlled her. Every part of her life when she wasn't with me. It wasn't just an affair. She was bound to him in ways I never thought possible. And she loved it. I felt a rage rise up inside me, boiling hot, like I could tear the walls of the house down with my bare hands. This was the same woman who kissed me goodbye every morning, who laughed at my jokes, who shared my bed for 2 decades. How could she be this person? A part of me didn't want to believe it, even as the evidence burned in my hands. She came out of the shower, toweling her hair dry, oblivious to the storm about to hit. My knuckles were white as I gripped the phone, fighting the urge to smash it against the wall. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I needed to know more, to feel the depth of her betrayal. So I put the phone back where I found it, and waited. That night, I barely slept. I lay there next to her, watching her chest rise and fall in the quiet darkness. Every breath she took like a weight pressing down on me. My thoughts raced, circling back to those messages, to the things I read that I couldn't unsee. I replayed it over and over. Her words, how she addressed him. The submission, the passion she poured into her replies, things I hadn't seen in her in years. The woman lying next to me wasn't the same person I thought I knew. The thought twisted in my gut, made me sick. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined them together. The images were too real, too vivid. Her body, her lips, her hands, doing things she never did with me. She used to be mine, all mine. But now, she wasn't. Not anymore. By the time morning came, the feeling had spread, like a poison coursing through my veins. I got up quietly, careful not to wake her. She shifted slightly, sighing in her sleep, still oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. I walked to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face, trying to clear my head, but no amount of cold water could wash away what I had learned. The whole day was a blur. At work, I couldn't focus. My mind kept wandering back to her. What was she doing now? Who was she texting? When would she sneak off again? I had to know. I had to understand why. Why wasn't I enough? That evening, I made a decision. I would dig deeper. If I was going to confront her, I needed everything. The truth in its entirety. I needed to see how far this had gone, how deep her betrayal ran. So when she left for her yoga class that night, I followed her. I parked a few blocks away, just out of sight. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched her get out of the car, dressed casually, hair pulled up, like it was just another ordinary evening. But nothing about this was ordinary. She didn't go to the yoga studio. She walked down the street, glancing around nervously, like she knew someone might be watching. That was the first confirmation I needed. This wasn't just some passing fling. She was hiding something, something big. I trailed her, staying far enough behind to avoid suspicion, but close enough to see everything. And then she turned the corner and disappeared into an old brick building. A building that wasn't a gym, wasn't a yoga studio. It looked abandoned, but there was a faint light inside, flickering through the blinds. My blood ran cold. I waited outside, sitting in the car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I couldn't see much through the grimy windows of the building, but the longer I sat there, the angrier I got. The minutes ticked by like hours, my mind racing with images of what was happening inside. Was she with him right now? Were they laughing at me, mocking me behind my back? And then, out of nowhere, she came out. Her hair was messy, cheeks flushed, eyes wide with adrenaline. She looked different, alive in a way I hadn't seen her in years. She stood there for a moment, adjusting her clothes, like she was trying to compose herself before heading back home to me. The rage that had been simmering inside me for days finally boiled over. I slammed my fist against the steering wheel, my vision tunneling with anger. But I didn't move. Not yet. Not tonight. I followed her back home, keeping my distance, my mind already spinning with what I'd uncovered. This was real. She was slipping away from me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. At least, not yet. I could barely look at her that night. She slipped back into the house quietly, her keys jingling as she hung them on the hook by the door. I sat on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. But the sound was muted, and all I could hear was the echo of her footsteps crossing the floor toward me. "Hey," she said casually, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "How was your day?" I swallowed the anger that burned in my throat and forced a smile. "Fine," I muttered, without taking my eyes off the screen. I didn't trust myself to look at her, not yet. Not after what I had seen. She kissed me on the forehead, her lips cold, and disappeared into the kitchen. I watched her move with an ease that sickened me. How could she act like nothing was wrong? Like she wasn't just coming from him? Every movement she made was a lie. Every word was tainted by what I knew now. I followed her with my eyes as she poured herself a glass of wine, humming softly. It was as if the weight of her deception had no effect on her. Meanwhile, it was crushing me, piece by piece, from the inside out. She sat down next to me, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of perfume mixed with sweat. The same perfume she had probably worn for him. The realization hit me hard. She didn't just cheat. She brought that filth back into my house, sat next to me with his scent still lingering on her skin. My stomach turned. I couldn't take it anymore. I got up abruptly, mumbling something about needing fresh air, and went outside, leaving her there in the dim glow of the living room. I stood on the porch, breathing in the cool night air, trying to steady myself, trying not to let the rage consume me. But it was too late. The floodgates were open, and I couldn't stop the torrent of dark thoughts from crashing through me. I was losing her. No, I had lost her. I didn't even know who she was anymore. The woman I married was a stranger, someone living a life I hadn't been part of for God knows how long. And then came the thoughts I wasn't ready for. Thoughts I didn't even want to admit to myself. What if I made her pay for this? The idea struck me like lightning, hot and electric. I could feel my pulse quicken as the notion took root. She had betrayed me, humiliated me, turned my life upside down for what? For some man who treated her like his toy. There was a part of me that wanted to destroy her for this, tear her down the way she had torn me apart. I was teetering on the edge, and I knew it. But I couldn't confront her yet. Not now. Not without knowing everything. If she was going to lie to my face, I needed to have the truth in my hands. Every sordid detail. So I made a plan. I would keep following her, watching her. I would find out exactly what she was hiding, how deep this went, and when I had all the pieces, when I had proof of her betrayal then, and only then, I would confront her. And she wouldn't see it coming. The days that followed felt like I was living two lives, much like she was. On the surface, everything seemed normal. We still ate dinner together. We still exchanged the occasional polite conversation about work, the kids, and the mundane. But beneath it, everything had changed. There was a constant tension coiling tighter inside me, a silent war playing out in my head every time I looked at her. I had become a hunter. Every glance, every word she said, every movement she made was scrutinized, dissected. I watched for clues, for slip-ups. But she was good. Too good. She played her role perfectly, almost like she'd been doing it for far longer than I realized. She was more careful with her phone now, taking it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom. She didn't know I already had enough. What I found was bad enough, but I wasn't done. I had barely scratched the surface, and I needed to know just how deep this went. The next time she left for one of her meetings, I followed her again. I stayed further back this time, making sure not to be seen. The route was different this time, which only heightened my suspicions. She wasn't stupid. She was careful, changing her patterns so no one would notice. But I wasn't about to let her slip through my fingers. She parked in a small lot behind a restaurant and walked down a narrow alleyway, her head turning to check if anyone was watching. I ducked behind a corner, my breath catching in my throat as she disappeared through a side door into a building I didn't recognize. This was it. I felt it in my gut. I waited for a few minutes, long enough for her to be settled inside, then crept toward the building. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might give me away, but I had to see what was happening. I couldn't live in this purgatory anymore, constantly imagining what she was doing, who she was with. I found a side window, cracked just enough to hear voices inside. My pulse quickened as I listened to her laugh, a sound that felt foreign to me now, followed by a man's voice. His voice. The one from the messages. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. I peered through the window. Inside, it wasn't some cheap affair in a dimly lit room. It was worse. It was a setup, almost like a performance. She wasn't just meeting a lover. She was performing for him, submitting to his every word. And there were others watching too. Other men, some sitting, some standing, all with the same twisted look of control and satisfaction as they observed the scene unfolding before them. She wasn't just his. She belonged to all of them. I felt bile rise in my throat as I realized what was happening. This wasn't just some affair. This was depravity. A life I had never imagined she was capable of. She reveled in it, the way she moved, the way she responded to his commands, to their gazes. It was like she was addicted, feeding off their attention, off their power over her. I backed away from the window, my hands shaking. My mind couldn't process what I had seen. This was beyond betrayal. This was her life now. A life she had chosen over me, over us. I stumbled back to the car, barely able to keep myself together. The rage I had felt before was nothing compared to what was boiling inside me now. I wanted to go back in there, rip her away from them, tear the place apart with my bare hands. But I didn't. Not yet. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so hard I thought it might snap. This had gone too far. I couldn't confront her now, not when I was on the edge of losing control. But soon, she would feel every ounce of pain, of anger, that she had inflicted on me. And she would regret it. The days after that discovery felt like a waking nightmare. Every second I spent in the same house as her made my skin crawl. I could barely stand to look at her, let alone speak to her, knowing what she had become. But I had to keep it together, at least for now. She had no idea I knew, and that gave me a small, twisted sense of control. I was playing a role now, just like she had been. I smiled when I had to. I kissed her goodnight, even though the thought of touching her made me want to recoil. But inside, I was a hurricane. The rage swirled so violently that I didn't know how much longer I could contain it. I needed to bide my time. I needed the right moment, the perfect moment to make her pay. Every night, I thought about confronting her, about pinning her against the wall and forcing her to confess every disgusting detail. But I wanted more than that. I didn't just want her to admit it. I wanted her to suffer for it. She had made a mockery of me, of our life. Now, it was my turn. It was another Thursday night when she left for her so-called yoga class. This time, though, I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. I knew where she was going. I knew what she was doing. Instead, I stayed home and waited. The hours dragged on like molasses, each tick of the clock stretching the silence to the breaking point. My thoughts spiraled, darker with each passing minute. Images of her with him, with them, flashed through my mind, each one more unbearable than the last. I paced the house, back and forth, my fists clenching and unclenching as I tried to keep myself together. But I couldn't. Not anymore. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't wait for the perfect moment any longer. The moment was now. I walked into our bedroom, the one we had shared for so many years, the one where I thought we were happy. My eyes fell on her side of the bed, her things neatly arranged on the nightstand. The sight of it enraged me. How she could live this double life and come back to this, pretending everything was normal. Without thinking, I tore the sheets off the bed, ripping them from the mattress in a fit of rage. The pillows followed, hurled across the room with a strength I didn't know I had. The lamp shattered against the wall. The sound of glass breaking was somehow satisfying, like a release of all the pressure that had been building up inside me for weeks. But it wasn't enough. I needed to destroy more. I needed to erase every trace of her from this place. I moved through the house like a tornado, tearing through drawers, knocking over furniture, ripping apart everything that reminded me of her. By the time I was done, the house looked like a war zone. Broken furniture, scattered belongings, torn photos of us from happier times. It was all in pieces now, just like the life we had built together. And then I waited. I sat in the wreckage, my breathing ragged, my heart pounding in my chest as I stared at the door, waiting for her to walk through it. When she finally came home, I heard her footsteps before I saw her. They were hesitant, like she could sense that something was off. And then she opened the door. Her eyes widened in shock as she took in the destruction around her. "What the hell happened here?" she asked, her voice trembling with confusion, maybe even fear. I stood up slowly, the anger in me so thick I could taste it. "What happened?" I repeated, my voice eerily calm. "You happened, Emma. You and your lies." She froze, her face paling as she realized what was happening. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For the first time, she was speechless. "I know everything," I said, stepping toward her, my eyes locked on hers. "I know where you go, who you're with. I know what you've been doing behind my back." She shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what you're talking about." I laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Don't lie to me. Don't you dare lie to me, not after everything." She backed up a step, her eyes darting toward the door like she was thinking of running. But there was nowhere to run now. Not from this. I grabbed her by the arm, yanking her toward me so hard that she gasped. "You're going to tell me everything. Every sick, twisted thing you've done. And then you're going to pay for it." She stared up at me, eyes wide with panic, her lips trembling as if she were trying to form words but couldn't. For a moment, I thought she might break, that the weight of everything would crush her and the truth would come spilling out. But instead, she yanked her arm free from my grip, stepping back, her face hardening. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she spat, her voice trembling with anger now. "You're crazy. What is all this? You've lost your mind." Crazy? I felt the word pierce through the haze of my rage, making my blood boil even hotter. She was still trying to deny it, still trying to play the part of the innocent, pretending that I was the one who had lost it. "Don't turn this on me," I growled, stepping toward her. "You think I don't know? You think I haven't seen it all? I've followed you, Emma. I've seen where you go, who you're with. I know what you've become." She blinked, momentarily stunned by the raw fury in my voice. I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes, but she quickly masked it, her expression shifting into something colder, more defensive. "You don't know what you're talking about." But I did. I knew everything now. I wasn't some fool blindly walking through life, trusting her lies. I had seen the depths of her betrayal, the sick, twisted world she had submerged herself in. "You belong to him, don't you?" The words came out before I could stop them, dripping with venom. "You've been with him, all of them." Her face drained of color. For the first time, she was caught, the truth too close, too raw. But she didn't deny it. Not this time. Instead, she looked away, her chest heaving with shallow breaths. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. I didn't want you to find out like this," she whispered, her voice fragile, barely audible. My chest tightened as I watched her crumble, my fingers twitching with the need to do something, anything to make this unbearable feeling go away. But her words, soft and broken, only made the pain sharper. She had just admitted it, admitted that everything I had feared, everything I had uncovered, was true. So, it's real, I said, my voice low, trembling with barely contained rage. You threw away our life? For this? She stood there, her arms wrapped around herself, her eyes glazed over like she wasn't even in the room with me anymore. You don't understand, she muttered. You can't understand. Understand? The word exploded out of me, my voice rising, vibrating through the walls. What the hell is there to understand, Emma? You're screwing other men behind my back, letting them treat you like... I couldn't even finish the sentence. The words turned to ash in my mouth. Her eyes flashed with something. Guilt, shame, defiance. I couldn't tell. She lifted her head, meeting my gaze. It's not just about the sex, she said, her voice hardening. It's about control. It's about feeling something real. Something you can't give me anymore. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The air was sucked out of the room, and for a moment, I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She continued, her words sharp, each one a dagger. I felt dead inside for years. I needed something. You wouldn't understand. My vision blurred with the intensity of my anger. I had given her everything. Years of my life, loyalty, stability, love, and it hadn't been enough. Now she was standing in front of me, telling me that I was the problem, that I was the one who had failed her. Something real? I repeated, my voice dangerously low. You think what you have with them is real? You're nothing to them, Emma. Nothing but a toy. And you're too blind to see it. She flinched, the truth of my words hitting her hard. But instead of breaking, she dug her heels in, lifting her chin in defiance. And what am I to you? Huh? A burden? A shadow of the woman you married? Her words cut deep, but they didn't hit the mark she wanted them to. I was too far gone now, too consumed by the anger and betrayal. This wasn't about what she had become in my eyes. It was about what she had chosen, how far she had fallen, and the fact that she had dragged our marriage down with her. I gave you everything, I said, my voice quiet but deadly. Everything. And you threw it away. For this. She opened her mouth to say something, but I didn't want to hear it. I couldn't. The room was closing in around me, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me, suffocating me. I needed to get out. I needed space, air, something to stop me from doing something I would regret. Without another word, I turned and stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard it rattled the windows. I could hear her calling after me, but I didn't stop. I couldn't face her. Not right now. Not when I was so close to losing control. The cool night air hit me like a slap in the face, but it did nothing to calm the storm raging inside. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding as I walked aimlessly down the street. I didn't know where I was going, just away from her, away from the house, away from the truth that had shattered everything I thought I knew. I couldn't breathe. The weight of her words, the sheer audacity of what she had done, crushed me. She hadn't just betrayed me physically. She had torn apart the very foundation of our life together. The anger inside me was no longer a flame. It was a wildfire, threatening to consume everything in its path. I kept walking, faster now, my fists clenched so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Images of her, of him, of them, flooded my mind, each one more unbearable than the last. The lies, the deceit, the way she had enjoyed every moment of it. It was like a knife twisting deeper into my chest. And the worst part? She didn't even seem sorry. She didn't seem to care. She had chosen this. She had chosen him, them, over me, over our family, over the life we had built. And now she was standing in my home, trying to make me believe that it was my fault, that I had driven her to this. The thought of it made my blood boil. How dare she take everything we had, everything we were, and twist it into something ugly and vile, then stand there and act like I was the one who didn't understand. I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't walk away, couldn't pretend that we could somehow move past this. She had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and now, I had to make sure she knew it. I stopped walking, my breath coming in ragged gasps as the plan began to take shape in my mind. I wasn't thinking clearly, but I didn't care. I was past the point of reason, past the point of forgiveness. All I wanted now was for her to feel what I was feeling. I wanted her to suffer, to know the same pain, the same humiliation that she had put me through. I turned on my heel and headed back toward the house, my steps deliberate, my mind racing. I was done with the waiting, the watching. It was time to take action. Time for her to pay for everything. When I got back to the house, it was quiet, almost eerily so. The destruction I had left in my wake was still there. The broken lamp, the shredded sheets, the scattered debris. It looked like a bomb had gone off, and in a way, it had. My rage had detonated, and the aftermath was all around me. I stood in the doorway, my breath heavy as I scanned the room. She was there, standing by the window, her back to me, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She didn't turn when she heard me come in, didn't say a word. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at her. The silence between us thick with unspoken words, with the anger that still pulsed hotly inside me. "You think you're the victim here," I said, my voice low, sharp, cutting through the quiet like a knife. "You think I'm the one who doesn't understand." She turned slowly to face me, her expression unreadable. "I never said I was the victim." "No, but you didn't have to." I stepped toward her, my jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might snap. "You made your choice. You decided that what we had wasn't enough for you. You let them use you, and you liked it." Her eyes flickered, but she didn't respond. She just stood there, staring at me with that same defiant look, like she wasn't ashamed of what she had done, like she didn't regret any of it. And that was the final straw. I moved faster than I thought possible, crossing the room in a few strides, my hand grabbing her by the wrist, yanking her toward me. Her eyes widened in surprise, but I didn't care. I was done playing nice, done pretending that any of this could be fixed. "You're going to tell me why?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fury. "You're going to explain to me why you did this, why you chose this. I want to hear it from you." She looked at me, her eyes glistening, but her lips remained sealed. For a moment, I thought she might actually say something, that she might try to explain herself, to give me some kind of reason for what she had done. But then, she pulled her wrist from my grasp and turned away, shaking her head. "There's nothing I can say that you'll understand," she whispered, her voice hollow. "Not anymore." I stood there, frozen, my mind reeling, my chest tight with anger, with frustration, with the overwhelming need to do something. Anything. Then why? Why did you do it? Her silence was deafening. And that's when I knew. She wasn't going to tell me. She wasn't going to give me the satisfaction of knowing why. She had made her choice, and there was no coming back from it. She was done with me, just as I was done with her. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. There was no saving this. There was no going back to how things were before. She was gone, and so was everything we had built together. All that was left was the wreckage, and I was about to tear it all down. I stood there, staring at her back as she turned away from me, refusing to give me the answer I craved. Her silence was louder than any words, a wall I couldn't break through. She wasn't going to explain herself. She wasn't going to apologize or grovel. She wasn't going to admit her guilt in the way I wanted her to. And that enraged me more than anything else. My mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, each one darker than the last. I could feel my control slipping away, the line between rationality and chaos blurring. I had come to confront her, to tear the truth from her lips, but now all I wanted was for her to feel the same pain, the same betrayal that she had carved into me. I wanted her to suffer. "I should have known," I said, my voice sharp, dripping with venom. "I should have seen it. All those nights you disappear, all those lies. You were playing me the whole time, weren't you? Laughing at me behind my back while you ran off to be someone else's plaything." She didn't answer. She just stood there, her back rigid, her breathing slow and deliberate. It was as if she had made peace with her actions, as if this was all inevitable. "Do you even regret it?" I demanded, stepping closer, my voice rising. "Do you feel anything for what you've done? Or are you so far gone you don't even care anymore?" She turned to face me then, her eyes dark, unreadable. There was no fear in her expression, no panic, no remorse. Just a cold resignation, like she had already made up her mind about how this would end. "I'm not going to apologize," she said quietly, her voice steady. "I'm not going to give you what you want. You'll never understand why I did it, and even if I told you, it wouldn't change anything. We're past that now." Her words hit me like a hammer, shattering any remaining illusions I had that this could be fixed, that somehow I could make sense of what she had done. She wasn't just indifferent. She was finished. Finished with me. Finished with us. I had become irrelevant in her eyes. That realization sent me over the edge. In a blind fury, I grabbed the nearest object, a vase on the table, and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the wall, fragments scattering across the floor. The sound of the crash echoed through the house, but it wasn't enough to drown out the rage boiling inside me. "How can you just stand there and act like this is nothing?" I shouted, my voice hoarse with fury. "How can you throw away everything we had like it meant nothing?" She flinched at the sound of the shattering vase, but her expression didn't change. She just stared at me, her eyes cold, distant, like she was watching a stranger. The woman I had known was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. "I'm not going to fight you," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "This is over, whether you like it or not." The finality of her words sent a fresh wave of anger surging through me. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. I wanted to scream, to rip everything apart until nothing was left standing. I wanted to destroy her the way she had destroyed me. I stormed across the room, my fists clenched, my body trembling with barely restrained rage. For a moment, I wasn't sure what I would do. The line between right and wrong had blurred so completely that all I could see was red. All I could feel was the overwhelming need to make her pay. But as I reached her, something stopped me. Maybe it was the look in her eyes, calm, resigned, as if she had already accepted her fate. Or maybe it was the tiny, flickering part of me that still remembered who I used to be before all of this. I stood there, inches away from her, my breathing heavy, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel the heat of my anger radiating off me, but I didn't move. I couldn't. I was frozen, trapped between the desire for revenge and the realization that no amount of violence, no amount of destruction, would make me feel whole again. This wasn't going to end the way I wanted it to. I knew that now. No matter what I did, I couldn't fix this. I couldn't make her regret what she had done. I couldn't force her to feel the pain I was feeling. She was beyond my reach, beyond my control, and that was the cruelest part of all. I stepped back, my hands trembling, my mind spinning with the weight of everything that had just collapsed around me. The rage still simmered, hot and poisonous, but I knew now that there was no outlet for it. Not here, not with her. "I hope it was worth it," I said quietly, my voice hollow. "I hope you got what you wanted, because you've lost everything else." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence between us said everything. This was over. I turned and walked out, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty hallway as I left the wreckage of our life behind. I walked out of the house that night and into the cold, suffocating silence of the empty streets. Every step felt heavier than the last, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on me. The adrenaline that had surged through my veins moments earlier was gone, leaving only a hollow numbness in its place. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to move, to keep walking, to put as much distance as I could between me and everything that had fallen apart inside that house. The air was crisp, biting at my skin, but I barely noticed it. My mind was still reeling, playing back every word she had said, every emotionless look on her face as she shattered everything I thought I knew about her, about us. She hadn't even tried to fight for it. For us. That's what stung the most. I had been ready to tear the world apart, to demand answers, to make her understand the devastation she had caused. But she didn't care. She was done. And I was left standing there, fists clenched, with nothing. The betrayal was complete. And now, all that was left was the emptiness. I kept walking, not really knowing where my feet were taking me, until I found myself at the park near our house. The same park we used to take our kids to when they were younger, the place where we'd sit on the bench, hand in hand, watching them play. Those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now, like they had been stripped away along with everything else that defined my life before tonight. I collapsed onto one of the benches, burying my face in my hands. The cold metal of the bench seeped through my clothes, but I didn't care. The pain that had been simmering beneath the surface all this time was now consuming me, and there was nothing left to do but feel it. I had been a fool, a blind, trusting fool. For years, I had believed in us. I had believed in the life we had built, in the promises we had made. I never imagined that something like this could happen, that she could turn into someone I didn't even recognize. But it had happened, and now, I had no idea what came next. The thoughts swirled in my head, spinning faster and faster until I couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. What was I supposed to do now? Where was I supposed to go from here? I could hear the sound of footsteps approaching, but I didn't look up. I didn't care who it was. I was too far gone in my own thoughts, too deep in the wreckage of everything that had just collapsed around me. "You okay, man?" A voice broke through the haze, unfamiliar but not unwelcome. I lifted my head slowly, blinking against the sudden glare of the streetlight overhead. A man, maybe in his early 20s, stood a few feet away, concern etched on his face. He looked hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he should even be talking to me. I tried to find words, but my mouth felt dry, my throat tight. I nodded slowly, even though nothing about me felt okay. I didn't know how to explain what I was feeling, didn't know if I even wanted to try. I wasn't sure if I could. The man lingered for a moment, as if waiting for me to say something, but when I didn't, he gave me a small, understanding nod and walked away, disappearing into the night. I watched him go, his footsteps fading into the distance, and for a brief moment, I envied him. His life was still intact. He wasn't standing on the edge of a crumbling cliff, staring into the void like I was. I stayed there on the bench for what felt like hours, my mind too numb to process anything beyond the overwhelming sense of loss. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it had nowhere to go. The fight was over. There was nothing left to burn. Eventually, I forced myself to get up, my body stiff from the cold. I walked back to the house, feeling like a stranger in my own skin. When I reached the front door, I hesitated for a moment, staring at the handle, wondering what I would find when I stepped inside. The house was quiet, too quiet. I could feel the emptiness in the air as soon as I stepped in. The mess I had made earlier was still there. The shattered vase, the scattered belongings, but she wasn't. The house felt like a tomb, filled with the ghosts of everything we had once been. I didn't call out for her. I didn't need to. I knew she was gone. The moment I left, she had disappeared, slipping away into the night just like the life we had shared. Maybe she was with him now. Maybe she was out there, starting a new chapter in her life without me. I didn't know, and I wasn't sure I cared anymore. I walked through the wreckage of the living room, my feet crunching over the broken pieces of our life together, and collapsed onto the couch. The weight of everything pressed down on me, so heavy I felt like I couldn't breathe. This was it. This was the end. I stared at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the chaos, but there was no sense to be found. There was just the overwhelming emptiness that stretched out before me, endless and unforgiving. And for the first time, I realized I was truly alone. The days blurred together after that night. Time lost its meaning. I couldn't remember the last time I ate a proper meal or slept for more than a few hours. The house felt hollow, like it wasn't mine anymore. The once familiar spaces echoed with a cold emptiness, and every room was a reminder of what I had lost, what she had taken from me. I hadn't heard from her since that night. Not a single call, not even a text. She was gone, vanished as if she had never been part of my life at all. And in her absence, I realized that I wasn't just angry anymore. I was broken. The anger that had consumed me, that had driven me to destroy everything, had burned out, leaving behind a vast, aching void. The betrayal had left its mark, deep and permanent, like a scar carved into my soul. I spent hours sitting on the couch, staring at the remnants of our life scattered around me, trying to make sense of it all. But the truth was, there was no making sense of it. There was no closure, no neat resolution that could help me move on. I thought I could punish her, that I could make her feel the weight of what she had done, but now I saw how futile it all was. She had already made her choice long before I ever found out, and now I was the one left picking up the pieces, trying to figure out how to move forward when everything felt shattered beyond repair. One afternoon, as I sat at the kitchen table, the sound of the front door opening startled me out of my thoughts. My heart pounded in my chest, a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. For a split second, I thought maybe it was her, coming back to explain, to face what she had done. But when I looked up, it wasn't her. It was a lawyer. He was a short, serious-looking man in a dark suit, holding a manila envelope in his hand. I didn't need to ask what it was. I knew. Divorce papers. The final nail in the coffin of our marriage. I sat there, numb, as he placed the envelope on the table in front of me. "She wanted this delivered to you," he said, his tone detached, professional. He didn't linger. He didn't say anything else. Just handed me the papers and left, the sound of the door clicking shut behind him. I stared at the envelope for what felt like hours, the weight of it crushing me. This was it. The end. No more guessing, no more hope, no more anger. Just the end. When I finally opened the envelope, I wasn't surprised by what I saw. A straightforward, no-fault divorce. No contest. No drawn-out fight. She wanted out as cleanly and quickly as possible. It hit me then, harder than anything else had. This wasn't just about the affair. This wasn't just about betrayal. She was erasing me from her life completely, wiping the slate clean as if we had never existed. I signed the papers. What else could I do? There was nothing left to fight for. She had already moved on, already decided that I wasn't part of her world anymore. And maybe that was for the best. I had spent so long drowning in the anger, the hurt, the betrayal, that I hadn't realized how much I needed to let go. But letting go wasn't as easy as signing a piece of paper. After I sent the divorce papers back, the silence in the house grew louder. I could hear it in every creak of the floorboards, in the hum of the refrigerator, in the stillness of the air. It pressed down on me, suffocating, until I couldn't take it anymore. So I packed a bag, just a small one, a few clothes, some essentials, and I walked out of the house for the last time. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe I'd get in the car and just drive. Maybe I'd leave town, leave everything behind. I didn't care anymore. All I knew was that I couldn't stay there, in that house filled with ghosts and memories of a life that no longer existed. The road stretched out before me, open and empty, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel the weight of the past dragging me down. The anger, the pain, the betrayal, they were still there, but they didn't own me anymore. As I drove away, I realized something. She hadn't just betrayed me. She had set me free. Free from the illusion that our life was something it wasn't. Free from the lies. Free from her. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I'd ever find peace, or love, or happiness again. But as the house disappeared in my rearview mirror, I knew one thing for sure. I was leaving the wreckage behind.